The brand on Sarah Sullivan's left shoulder blade burned not from pain, but from memory, as she stepped off the dusty stagecoach into Sierra City, California, on that scorching afternoon in August of 1875. She clutched her worn leather satchel close, watching the other passengers disperse into the crowded street while she stood frozen, wondering if the man who had paid for her passage across 3 states would notice the mark that declared her former ownership under another man's cruelty. The advertisements in the newspapers back east made mail-order arrangements sound romantic, even advantageous for women with few prospects. But Sarah knew the truth hiding beneath her high-collared dress was anything but romantic. The hotel keeper had given her directions to the Lucky Star Ranch, 5 miles west of town, where Theodore Morrison awaited his purchased bride. Sarah had corresponded with him through carefully worded letters over the past 4 months, never once mentioning the scar that Jacob Thornton had burned into her flesh 2 years prior in Kansas, claiming her as property when she had worked as a maid in his household. She had escaped that hell with help from an abolitionist woman who understood that slavery took many forms, even a decade after the war's end. Now here she stood in California, about to bind herself to another stranger, praying this time would be different. "Miss Sullivan." A deep voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. Sarah turned to find a tall man with sun-weathered skin and piercing gray eyes studying her from beneath a worn Stetson. He wore typical ranch clothes, dusty from hard work, and there was something about the straightforward way he looked at her, without the calculating gaze she had learned to fear, that made her shoulders relax slightly. "Yes, I am Sarah Sullivan. Are you from the Lucky Star Ranch?" "No, madam." "I am Caleb Lancaster. I own the neighboring spread, the Copper Ridge Ranch. Theodore Morrison asked me to fetch you since he got tied up with a sick horse. He sends his apologies." Sarah's stomach twisted. Already her intended was sending proxies, unable to meet her himself. She forced a smile and nodded. "I understand. Ranching duties must come first." Caleb reached for her satchel. "May I?" She hesitated before releasing it, studying this man who would deliver her to her fate. He was probably in his late 20s, with strong hands that handled her bag gently. His face had honest lines around his eyes, the kind that came from squinting into the sun during long days of outdoor work rather than from deceit or cruelty. "Your journey must have been exhausting," Caleb said as he led her toward a sturdy wagon. "Sierra City is a fair distance from anywhere civilized." "I have traveled from St. Louis," Sarah replied, accepting his hand as he helped her onto the wagon seat. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her palm. "I am accustomed to exhaustion." Something in her tone must have betrayed more than she intended, because Caleb glanced at her sharply before climbing up beside her. He did not pry, though, simply clicked his tongue to start the horses moving through the crowded Main Street. Sierra City bustled with activity despite the oppressive heat. Gold had been discovered in these mountains 20 years earlier, and while the easy pickings were long gone, enough miners still worked the surrounding hills to keep the town prosperous. Saloons lined one side of the street, respectable shops the other. Women in practical dresses hurried about their business while men conducted deals on every corner. "It is a lively place," Sarah observed. "Growing every month," Caleb agreed, "though the ranch lands are quieter. Theodore has a decent spread. Good grazing land, reliable water source. You will want for nothing material." The careful way he phrased that last statement made Sarah wonder what he was not saying. "You have known Mr. Morrison long, 5 years, since I bought my property. He is a hard worker, keeps to himself mostly, not much for socializing." Caleb paused. "Can I speak plainly, Miss Sullivan?" Sarah's hands tightened in her lap. Please do. Theodore is not an easy man. He is fair, not cruel from what I have seen, but he is set in his ways. He treats his ranch hands firmly and expects obedience. He will likely expect the same from a wife. Most men do, Sarah said quietly. True enough. Caleb guided the wagon onto a rutted road leading away from town into golden hills dotted with oak trees. But there are different ways of expecting things. Some men ask, others demand. Theodore tends toward the latter. And which are you, Mr. Lancaster? The question surprised them both. Caleb was quiet for a long moment as the wagon wheels creaked over the uneven ground. I suppose I would want a partner, not a possession. But I am not the one you are meant to marry, so my ways do not matter much. Except his ways suddenly mattered a great deal to Sarah, though she could not understand why. Perhaps because he was the first man in longer than she could remember to speak to her, as though her thoughts held value. Or perhaps because there was something solid and genuine about him that made her wish circumstances were different. They traveled in comfortable silence for a time. The landscape was beautiful in a harsh way, all golden grass and rugged hills beneath an endless blue sky. So different from the green humidity of Missouri or the flat brutality of Kansas. Sarah tried to imagine making a life here, tried to picture Theodore Morrison as a husband she could tolerate, but her mind kept drifting to the man beside her, to the capable way he handled the horses, and the occasional glances he cast her direction when he thought she was not looking. "May I ask what brought you west as a mail-order bride?" Caleb asked eventually. "You seem educated, well-spoken. Surely you had other options." Sarah had prepared answers to such questions, careful truths that revealed nothing dangerous. "My parents died of influenza 3 years ago. I had no siblings, no inheritance. Working as a governess or seamstress would barely sustain me. Marriage seemed the better choice. But marriage to a stranger sight unseen. Sometimes strangers are safer than familiar faces." The words escaped before she could stop them. Caleb turned to look at her fully then, and Sarah saw understanding dawn in his gray eyes. He did not press for details, but something shifted between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of pain recognized. "The Copper Ridge Ranch is just over that rise," Caleb said, pointing ahead. "Lucky Star is another mile beyond. If you ever need anything, Miss Sullivan, anything at all, you would be welcome to call on me. I mean that sincerely. Why would you offer such a thing to a stranger? Because something tells me you might need a friend out here. And because I would hope someone would do the same for my sister, if I had one in your circumstances." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes unexpectedly. Kindness was a luxury she had not experienced much of late, and it threatened to crack the careful walls she had built around her heart. She blinked rapidly, focusing on the horizon. "Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. That is generous. Caleb, please. We are neighbors now, after all. Then you must call me Sarah." He smiled, a genuine expression that softened his weathered features. "Sarah it is." The Lucky Star Ranch came into view over the next hill. It was a substantial operation with a large main house built of timber and stone, a sizable barn, several outbuildings and corrals holding perhaps 30 horses. Men worked in the distance, and cattle dotted the surrounding pastures. Theodore Morrison had clearly built something successful here. A man emerged from the barn as they approached, wiping his hands on a rag. He was shorter than Caleb, stockier, with dark hair going gray at the temples, and a stern face that looked like it rarely smiled. He wore expensive boots and a clean shirt despite the barn work, projecting an air of prosperity and control. "That is Theodore," Caleb said unnecessarily. Sarah's stomach churned. This was the moment she had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. She smoothed her skirts and lifted her chin, determined to face whatever came with dignity. Caleb brought the wagon to a stop, and Theodore Morrison approached, his dark eyes assessing Sarah with the same thoroughness one might evaluate livestock. She forced herself not to flinch under his scrutiny. "Miss Sullivan," Theodore said by way of greeting. His voice was flat, businesslike. "You are punctual. That is good. I value promptness." "Mr. Morrison." Sarah accepted Caleb's help down from the wagon, grateful for his steadying hand. "I trust the journey was not too taxing," Theodore continued, though his tone suggested he did not particularly care either way. "Caleb, I appreciate you collecting her. I can take things from here." It was a clear dismissal. Caleb hesitated, glancing between Sarah and Theodore with an expression Sarah could not quite read. Finally, he nodded. "Of course, Miss Sullivan, remember what I said." "I will. Thank you for everything." Caleb tipped his hat and climbed back onto the wagon. Sarah watched him drive away, feeling as though her only lifeline was disappearing over the hill. She turned back to Theodore, who was still studying her with that calculating gaze. "You are prettier than I expected from your description," Theodore said. "That is fortunate. I have a position to maintain in this community, and an attractive wife will be an asset. An asset. Not a partner, not even a person. An asset." Sarah's heart sank, but she maintained her composure. "I hope to be a good wife to you, Mr. Morrison. Theodore, when we are alone." "Mr. Morrison in company." He picked up her satchel. "Come inside. I will show you the house and we can discuss expectations. The Reverend can marry us tomorrow morning, no point in delaying. Tomorrow." Sarah had known the marriage would happen quickly, but the reality of it struck her like a physical blow. Tomorrow, she would belong to this cold man who looked at her like property. Tomorrow, she would be legally bound to obey him in all things. The house interior was well appointed but sterile, lacking any warmth or personal touches. Theodore led her through rooms furnished with expensive but practical pieces, pointing out where things were kept and explaining his routines with military precision. The kitchen was larger than necessary for two people, clearly designed for entertaining that Sarah suspected rarely happened. "You will manage the household, of course," Theodore said as they concluded the tour in the parlor. "I employ a woman from town, Mrs. Chen, who comes 3 times a week for heavy cleaning and laundry. But daily cooking, mending, and general upkeep will be your responsibility. I entertain business associates monthly. You will be expected to present well at those dinners." "I understand. I am capable in all those areas." "Good." Theodore gestured to a chair. "Sit. We should discuss other matters before tomorrow." Sarah sat, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. Theodore remained standing, a deliberate power position. "I am not a romantic man, Miss Sullivan. I do not believe in flowery words or sentimental gestures. I need a wife to manage my home and eventually bear my children. In exchange, you will have security, comfort, and my protection. I am not cruel, but I am firm. I expect obedience and efficiency. As long as you fulfill your duties, we will get along well enough." "And if I fail to meet your expectations?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Then we would have to address it, but I am sure you are intelligent enough to avoid such unpleasantness." He paused. "I have one other expectation that must be made clear. There is a woman in town, Margaret Shaw, who was my companion before I decided to marry. That arrangement is concluded, but I still see her occasionally for business purposes. Her brother runs the feed store. I trust you will not create difficulties about this." Sarah's fingernails dug into her palms. So there was another woman, one he was not entirely finished with. "I see. As long as we understand each other. Do you have any questions?" 1,000 questions swirled in Sarah's mind, but only one mattered. "Will you be kind to me, Theodore?" He seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. I have said I am not cruel. Is that not sufficient? Not cruel and actually kind are different things. I suppose they are. I will treat you fairly, Sarah. That is the best I can promise. He moved toward the door. Your room is the second door on the left upstairs. Rest tonight. Tomorrow your new life begins. After he left, Sarah climbed the stairs to her assigned room. It was spacious and clean, with a large bed and wardrobe, a washstand and mirror. She set her satchel on the bed and moved to the window, looking out over the ranch lands toward the distant hills where Caleb's property lay. She undressed slowly, performing her evening routine by rote. When she reached for her nightgown, she caught sight of herself in the mirror, the brand on her shoulder blade visible in the lamplight. The letters JT, for Jacob Thornton, scarred into her skin with a hot iron after she had tried to leave his employment. He had called her ungrateful, said she needed to remember who she belonged to. The infection that followed had nearly killed her. Sarah traced the mark with her fingers, feeling the raised tissue. Tomorrow she would marry Theodore Morrison, and while he would not physically brand her, she would belong to him just as surely. The thought made her chest tighten with panic. She lay awake most of the night, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, wondering if she had fled one prison only to enter another, and thinking, despite herself, about gray eyes and a kind voice offering friendship when she needed it most. Morning came too quickly. Theodore knocked on her door at dawn with a dress he had apparently purchased for the occasion, a simple but respectable blue cotton affair. It fit well enough. Sarah dressed mechanically, braided her hair and pinned it up, splashed water on her face. The woman in the mirror looked pale but composed. The ceremony took place in the small church in Sierra City. The reverend was an elderly man who seemed more interested in his breakfast than the sacrament he performed. Theodore had arranged for 2 ranch hands to serve as witnesses. The whole affair took less than 15 minutes. Do you, Theodore Morrison, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Sarah Sullivan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Sarah's voice caught. She thought of the brand on her shoulder, of Jacob Thornton's cruelty, of Theodore's cold assessment of her as an asset. She thought of Caleb's kind eyes and his words about wanting a partner, not a possession. I do, she whispered, though the words felt like surrender. The reverend pronounced them married. Theodore did not kiss her, simply nodded as though concluding a business transaction. They signed the registry and left the church as husband and wife, bound by law if not by affection. The ride back to the ranch was silent. Sarah watched the landscape pass, feeling as though she were watching her own funeral procession. Theodore handled the wagon efficiently, his profile stern and unyielding. We will have supper with Caleb Lancaster tomorrow evening, Theodore announced suddenly. He requested it when I mentioned we were marrying today. Said he wanted to welcome you properly to the area. I expect you to make a good impression. Of course. Sarah's heart lifted slightly at the prospect of seeing Caleb again, then immediately felt guilty for the reaction. She was a married woman now. Such thoughts were inappropriate. The days that followed established a pattern. Sarah rose early to prepare breakfast, spent her days cleaning and cooking and managing the household, and went to bed exhausted in her separate room. Theodore treated her with distant politeness, like a competent employee rather than a wife. He had not yet insisted on consummating the marriage, for which Sarah was grateful and confused in equal measure. She learned the rhythms of ranch life, met the hands who worked the property, and slowly began to feel less like a visitor and more like a permanent fixture. Mrs. Chen, the Chinese woman who helped with heavy chores, proved to be a quiet but warm presence, and Sarah appreciated having another woman nearby, even if they communicated more through gestures than words due to Mrs. Chen's limited English. The dinner at Caleb's ranch came on the third evening of Sarah's marriage. She dressed carefully in her best remaining dress, a green cotton that brought out her eyes. Theodore inspected her appearance with approval before helping her onto the wagon. The Copper Ridge Ranch was smaller than the Lucky Star, but somehow more welcoming. The house was modest but well-maintained, with flowers growing in boxes by the windows, and a porch that looked actually used. Caleb greeted them at the door, and Sarah's breath caught at the genuine smile that spread across his face when he saw her. "Welcome, both of you. Sarah, I am glad to see you again." "Thank you for having us, Caleb." Theodore shook Caleb's hand with businesslike efficiency. "Good of you to invite us. Sarah has been working hard to settle in." The meal Caleb served was simple but delicious, beef and potatoes with fresh bread. He was surprisingly skilled in the kitchen for a bachelor rancher. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily, mostly about ranch business and local news. Sarah listened more than she spoke, watching the interaction between the two men. "How are you finding married life, Sarah?" Caleb asked eventually, his gray eyes searching her face. "I am adjusting," Sarah said carefully. "Everything is new, but I am learning." "She is competent," Theodore said, as though Sarah were not sitting right there. "The house has never run better." Something flickered in Caleb's expression, a tightness around his eyes. "I am sure Sarah brings more to the marriage than just competence." "Of course. I meant no offense." Theodore seemed oblivious to the tension. After dinner, Theodore excused himself to examine a horse Caleb had mentioned might be for sale, leaving Sarah and Caleb alone in the house. The silence stretched between them, charged with something Sarah could not name. "Are you all right?" Caleb asked quietly. Truly, Sarah wanted to lie, to say everything was fine, but something about his genuine concern broke through her defenses. "He is not cruel. That is more than I had before." "Before?" Caleb moved closer, his voice gentle. "What happened before, Sarah?" She should not tell him. She was a married woman now, and sharing such intimacy with another man was wrong. But the words came anyway, pulled by the compassion in his eyes and her desperate need to tell someone, anyone, about the weight she carried. "I worked for a man in Kansas as a maid in his household. Jacob Thornton. He was wealthy, respected, and he was a monster." Sarah's hand unconsciously moved toward her shoulder. "When I tried to leave his employment, he branded me, like cattle, said I needed to remember who I belonged to." Caleb's face went white, then red with fury. "He what?" "Burned his initials into my shoulder blade with an iron meant for livestock. The letters JT. I nearly died from the infection that followed." Sarah blinked back tears. "A woman helped me escape eventually, got me out of Kansas, but the mark remains. I am branded property, Caleb. No matter how far I run, that truth is burned into my skin." "Sarah, no." Caleb's hands hovered near her arms, clearly wanting to offer comfort but unsure if touch would be welcome. "You are not property. You are a human being with inherent worth that no scar can diminish. The law sees it differently. Women belong to their fathers, then their employers, then their husbands. Jacob Thornton was punishing me for forgetting my place." "Did Theodore see it? The brand?" Sarah shook her head. "I have been careful, but eventually he will, and then he will know what I am." "What you are is a survivor." Caleb's voice was fierce. "What you are is strong and brave for starting over despite what was done to you. That mark is not shame, Sarah. It is evidence of injustice, and it reflects on the man who inflicted it, not on you." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. No one had ever spoken to her this way, validating her pain instead of dismissing it. "You are kind to say so." "I am honest to say so." And Sarah, if you ever need help, if Theodore or anyone ever treats you as less than the valuable person you are, you come to me. Do you understand? You are not alone anymore." The intensity of his words, the care in his eyes, made Sarah's heart ache with longing for something she could not name. Or perhaps she could name it but dare not. This man before her, this near stranger who offered friendship and protection without expecting anything in return, represented everything she had never had but desperately wanted. "I should not be talking to you like this," Sarah whispered. "I am married now. You should be able to talk to someone. Everyone needs that." Caleb stepped back, giving her space. "I am not trying to come between you and Theodore. I just want you to know you have a friend. I have never had a friend like you. Then it is past time you did." Theodore returned then, satisfied with the horse he had examined. They said their goodbyes and made the journey back to the Lucky Star Ranch as darkness fell. Sarah was quiet, her mind replaying every word of her conversation with Caleb, every moment of connection she had felt with him. That night, Theodore knocked on her bedroom door. Sarah opened it, heart pounding, knowing what his presence meant. "It is time we made this marriage official in all ways," Theodore said, entering without invitation. "I have been patient while you settled in, but I have expectations." Sarah forced herself to nod. She had known this was coming. This was part of the bargain she had made when she agreed to be a mail-order bride. Theodore was efficient and impersonal, treating the conjugal act as one more duty to be checked off his list. He did not hurt her, but neither did he show any tenderness or care for her comfort. When it was over, he returned to his own room without a word, leaving Sarah to stare at the ceiling and wonder how she would endure a lifetime of such cold transactions. Weeks passed in a blur of domestic routines and quiet misery. Theodore was exactly what he had promised to be, not cruel, but completely lacking in warmth. He complimented her cooking the way one might approve of a good horse, and their conversations never ventured beyond practical matters. The monthly dinner parties he hosted allowed Sarah to see him in company, where he played the role of successful rancher with polished ease, presenting her as his decorative wife. Sarah saw Caleb occasionally when he stopped by on ranch business, or when they attended church services in town. Each time his eyes would find hers with a question she could not answer. "Are you all right?" And each time she would nod slightly, maintaining the fiction that everything was fine, but everything was not fine. Sarah felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller and quieter, the spark that had helped her survive Jacob Thornton's cruelty dimming under Theodore's indifference. She was fed and clothed and housed, all her physical needs met, but something essential was starving. It was during the 4th month of her marriage that everything changed. Theodore hosted one of his business dinners, entertaining 3 ranchers from the neighboring county who were interested in purchasing some of his horses. Sarah had spent the day preparing an elaborate meal, determined to meet Theodore's exacting standards. The evening proceeded smoothly through dinner. The men drank whiskey and talked horses and land prices while Sarah served and cleared dishes. She was in the kitchen preparing coffee when she heard Theodore's voice rise in the dining room. "Sarah, bring more whiskey." She hurried to comply, entering the dining room with a fresh bottle. As she leaned forward to pour for one of the guests, her dress collar shifted, revealing just the edge of the brand on her shoulder blade. "Well now, what do we have here?" The guest, a rough-looking man named Garrett, grabbed Sarah's arm before she could pull away. He yanked her collar down, exposing the JT scar. "Theodore, did you know your pretty wife is branded property?" The room went silent. Sarah froze, mortification and terror flooding through her. Theodore's face darkened as he stood and came around the table. "What is this?" he demanded. "It is nothing," Sarah whispered, trying to pull free from Garrett's grip. Please, I can explain. Looks like JT to me, another guest said with a crude laugh. Somebody marked their territory permanent like. Jacob Thornton, maybe. He is in these parts now, you know. Bought a spread over in Fresno County about a year back. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Jacob Thornton was here. In California. She had thought herself safe, had believed 3 states would be enough distance. Release my wife, Theodore said coldly to Garrett, who finally let go. Theodore grasped Sarah's chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. You deceived me. You came into this marriage marked like livestock and said nothing. I am sorry, Sarah pleaded. I should have told you, but I was afraid you would not marry me if you knew. Please understand, I had nowhere else to go. You made me a laughingstock. Theodore's voice was low and dangerous. Every man at this table now knows my wife belonged to someone else, that she is damaged goods. She is not goods at all, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Caleb standing there, his face hard as granite. He must have heard the commotion from outside, where he had been delivering some papers Theodore had requested earlier. Lancaster, this is not your business, Theodore said. It became my business when you started treating Sarah like an object instead of a person. Caleb walked into the room, positioning himself near Sarah. What happened to her was a crime, not a character flaw. Any man with decency would understand that. Any man with pride would not accept a branded woman as his wife, Garrett interjected. Hell, if she belonged to Jacob Thornton before, maybe he has claim to her still. Brands usually mean permanent ownership. She was never his property, Caleb's voice rose. And she sure as hell is not yours, Morrison. Sarah is a human being with rights and dignity, regardless of what some monster did to her. Theodore's face flushed with rage. You forget yourself, Lancaster. She is my wife by law. I will handle this situation as I see fit. If you plan to handle it by hurting or humiliating her further, you will answer to me. The threat hung in the air. Sarah looked between the 2 men, horrified that her secret had caused this confrontation. She felt exposed, vulnerable, every worst fear realized. Get out of my house, Theodore said to Caleb, and take her with you, Sarah gasped. What? I will not have a branded woman as my wife. This marriage is a fraud. I want you gone. Theodore turned to his guests. You are witnesses. I am putting her aside for deception. Theodore, please, Sarah begged. I have nowhere to go. I will do better, I promise. You should have thought of that before lying to me. Theodore's face was implacable. Caleb wants to defend you so badly. Let him deal with you. Take her, Lancaster. I wash my hands of this. Caleb moved to Sarah's side, his presence solid and protective. Come with me, Sarah. You do not have to stay where you are not wanted. But the marriage, we will figure it out. Right now, you need to leave. Caleb's hand on her elbow was gentle but firm, guiding her toward the door. Sarah allowed herself to be led from the room, from the house, from the marriage that had been her desperate attempt at security. Caleb helped her onto his wagon, then went back inside to retrieve her satchel. She heard raised voices, Theodore and Caleb arguing, but could not make out the words over the roaring in her ears. When Caleb returned, his jaw was clenched tight. He climbed onto the wagon and started the horses moving toward his property without a word. Sarah sat frozen, too shocked to cry, too overwhelmed to think clearly. I am ruined, she finally whispered. An abandoned wife with no money, no prospects, and a brand marking me as property. What will become of me? You will stay with me, Caleb said firmly. As my guest, properly chaperoned. Mrs. Dawson in town has been after me to hire her daughter as a housekeeper. I will bring them both to stay at the ranch. Everything will be above reproach. But Theodore could accuse you of adultery, of stealing his wife. He just threw you out in front of witnesses. Let him try. Caleb glanced at her, his expression softening. Sarah, I know you are scared, but you are not ruined. You are free. Free. The word sounded foreign, impossible. Sarah had never been free, not really. Even before Jacob Thornton's brutality, she had been bound by expectations and limited options. Freedom was not something she knew how to imagine. They reached the Copper Ridge Ranch, and Caleb helped her down from the wagon with infinite care. He showed her to a small bedroom that smelled of lavender and fresh linens, a room that felt more welcoming in 5 minutes than the Lucky Star had in 4 months. Rest tonight, Caleb said from the doorway. Tomorrow, we will work out the details. But Sarah, one thing I need you to understand. You are no one's property. Not Thornton's, not Theodore's, and not mine. You are your own person, and you get to decide what comes next. After he left, Sarah sat on the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. But these tears were different from the ones she had shed in Theodore's house. These were tears of release, of exhaustion, of tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, Caleb was right. Morning brought clarity and complications in equal measure. Caleb had been up since dawn, riding into Sierra City to speak with Mrs. Dawson about the housekeeper position. He returned with both Mrs. Dawson and her daughter Emma, a cheerful girl of 19 who chattered constantly as she unpacked her things. "Oh, Miss Sarah, Mr. Lancaster told us about your situation," Emma said sympathetically. "That Theodore Morrison always seemed cold to me. You are better off away from him, I say." "Emma, mind your tongue," Mrs. Dawson chided, though not unkindly. "Miss Sarah needs rest and peace, not gossip." But gossip was inevitable. By afternoon, it seemed everyone in Sierra City knew that Theodore Morrison had discovered his bride was branded and had thrown her out. The story spread like wildfire, growing more sensational with each telling. Caleb returned from town looking grim. "People are talking. Most are sympathetic to you, but there are some saying Theodore was right to put you aside. And Sarah, there is something else you need to know." "What?" "Jacob Thornton is coming to town. Someone sent word to him about the situation. He arrives tomorrow." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "No, no, he cannot find me. You do not understand what he is like." "Then help me understand. Tell me everything." So Sarah told him. She described her parents' death, her desperate search for employment, the position in Jacob Thornton's household that had seemed like a blessing. She explained how his attention had gradually shifted from employer to something darker, how he had propositioned her repeatedly and grown violent when she refused. She told him about the night she tried to flee and how he had caught her, dragging her to the barn where he kept his branding irons. "He said if I was going to act like stubborn livestock, he would treat me as such," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "He heated the iron and held me down himself. I screamed until my throat bled, but no one came. His ranch was remote and his men were too scared of him to interfere. Afterward, he locked me in a room for weeks while the wound festered. A maid named Clara finally helped me escape. She got me to the abolitionist woman who arranged my passage east, and then eventually west again." Caleb's face had gone white with rage. "That man belongs in prison." "Men like Jacob Thornton do not go to prison. They are too wealthy, too connected, and I have no proof beyond my word against his. The brand actually helps him, do you not see? He can claim I am his property, that I ran away, that he has a legal right to reclaim me. You are not a slave. Slavery is illegal. For black people, yes. But there are many ways to own someone, Caleb. Debt servitude, marriage, employment contracts. The law is not always on the side of women, especially poor women with no family." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with the injustice of what she described. Finally, he met her eyes with fierce determination. "I will not let him take you. Whatever it requires, you are under my protection now. You cannot fight him. Jacob Thornton destroys anyone who opposes him. Then he has not met me yet. The next day, Jacob Thornton arrived in Sierra City like a storm rolling over the mountains. He was exactly as Sarah remembered, tall and imposing with silver hair and cold blue eyes that missed nothing. He wore expensive clothes and carried himself with the arrogance of someone accustomed to getting his way. Caleb received word that Thornton had gone directly to the sheriff, claiming Sarah was his indentured servant who had stolen from him and fled. He was demanding her return. "This is exactly what I feared," Sarah said, pacing Caleb's parlor while Emma and Mrs. Dawson watched anxiously. "He will twist everything to make me the criminal." "Then we need proof of what he did to you," Caleb said. "Documentation, witnesses, something to counter his claims." "I have nothing. Clara, the maid who helped me, could testify, but I do not know where she is now. She was planning to move west herself, afraid of Thornton's retaliation." "What about the doctor who treated your wound?" "I was afraid to see a doctor. The infection broke eventually, but I treated it myself with supplies Clara smuggled to me." Caleb thought hard. "The brand itself is proof of violence, and we have witnesses that Theodore knew nothing of it before the dinner, which proves you were not working with Thornton. That argues against you being his willing servant, or it proves I am a liar and a thief, exactly as he claims." Sarah sank into a chair, defeated. "I cannot win against him, Caleb. I never could." "Sarah Sullivan, you listen to me." Caleb knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. "I have watched you these past months. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. You survived something that would break most people, and you kept going. You started over in a strange place with nothing but hope. That is not weakness. That is extraordinary courage." "Then why do I feel so afraid?" "Because fear is the reasonable response to danger, but you do not have to face this danger alone anymore." Caleb's gray eyes were intense, burning with something Sarah was afraid to name. "Let me stand with you. Let me help you fight." "Why would you do this for me? Risk your reputation, your business, maybe even your freedom if Thornton convinces the law to charge you with theft or kidnapping." "Because it is the right thing to do, and because—" Caleb paused, seeming to struggle with words. "Because somewhere along the way I stopped thinking of you as Theodore's wife or even as just a friend. Sarah, I have come to care for you deeply. The thought of that monster reclaiming you makes me want to burn down the world." Sarah's breath caught. "Caleb, I am still married. Whatever I might feel, it would be wrong. Theodore cast you out. The marriage is over in everything but paperwork. The paperwork matters, and my feelings are too confused right now to trust. I have been owned by my employer, owned by my husband. I do not know how to be anything but someone's possession." "Then learn." Caleb squeezed her hands gently. "Stay here, under proper chaperonage, and learn what it means to make your own choices. Whether those choices include me or not. You deserve the chance to discover who Sarah Sullivan really is when no one is branding her or buying her or treating her like property." Before Sarah could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. Emma answered it to find the sheriff standing there, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Sarah Sullivan?" the sheriff asked. "Yes." Sarah stood, Caleb rising protectively beside her. "I need you to come to my office, madam. Jacob Thornton has made serious allegations, and we need to sort this matter out properly." "She is not going anywhere without representation," Caleb said firmly. "And I am coming with her." The sheriff nodded. "That would be fine, Mr. Lancaster, but we need to do this official-like. There are questions about ownership and theft that need answering." The word ownership sent ice through Sarah's veins, but she lifted her chin. "I will come. I have nothing to hide." The sheriff's office was small and crowded when they arrived. Jacob Thornton stood near the desk, radiating authority and displeasure. Theodore Morrison was there too, looking uncomfortable. Several other townspeople had gathered, drawn by the drama. "There she is," Thornton said the moment Sarah entered. "Sheriff, I want that woman arrested for theft and breach of contract. She is my indentured servant who fled my property in Kansas 2 years ago, stealing money and valuables when she left." "That is a lie," Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I was never indentured to him. I was his employee and I left because he assaulted me." "Assaulted?" Thornton laughed coldly. "Sheriff, this woman was a maid in my household who developed an unhealthy attachment to me. When I rejected her advances, she became vindictive. She stole from me and ran away. The brand on her shoulder is my mark, proof that she belongs to my household." "The brand is proof that you committed assault with a deadly weapon," Caleb interjected. "No employer has the right to burn their mark into an employee's flesh." "I have the right to mark my property as I see fit," Thornton countered. "Sarah Sullivan signed a contract for 7 years of service in exchange for passage to Kansas and room and board. She broke that contract after 2 years and fled. The branding was a legal method of preventing her from selling herself to another employer under false pretenses." "Show us this contract," the sheriff said. Thornton produced a document from his coat pocket. Sarah's heart sank as she recognized her own signature at the bottom. She had been so desperate for employment after her parents died, she had signed without reading carefully, trusting that the position was what Thornton claimed. "This appears legitimate," the sheriff said, examining the paper. "Miss Sullivan, did you sign this?" "I signed an employment agreement, yes. But I did not understand it was for 7 years, and it did not mention anything about branding or physical punishment. He changed the terms after I arrived." "Your word against mine," Thornton said smoothly. "And I have documentation while you have only accusations. Sheriff, I want my property returned. She owes me 5 more years of service, and I intend to collect." "She is not property," Caleb's voice rang through the small office. "And even if that contract were valid, which I doubt, human beings cannot be owned. The 13th Amendment applies to slavery, not to legitimate employment contracts," Thornton interrupted. "People sign away their labor all the time in exchange for passage or debt settlement." "It is perfectly legal." The sheriff looked troubled. "This is a complicated matter. I am not sure I have jurisdiction over a contract dispute from Kansas." "Then send word to the authorities there," Caleb said. "In the meantime, Sarah stays where she is, free and under protection." "Harboring stolen property is a crime, Lancaster," Thornton said dangerously. "I could have you arrested as well. Try it." The tension in the room was explosive. Sarah looked between the two men, seeing disaster approaching. She had to do something to prevent Caleb from destroying himself for her sake. "I will go with him," Sarah said quietly. "What? No." Caleb turned to her, horrified. "If I go willingly, there is no crime. No theft, no harboring, nothing to use against you." Sarah met Jacob Thornton's cold eyes, seeing the satisfaction there. "I will return to your employment, Mr. Thornton, and work out the remainder of my contract, under one condition." "You are in no position to make conditions," Thornton said. "Nevertheless, I will not go without it. You will put in writing that my service is only as a housekeeper, with clearly defined duties and wages. You will provide separate quarters with a lock I control. And you will never touch me again, not in violence and not in any other way. If you agree to these terms before witnesses, I will come." Thornton studied her, clearly weighing his options. He wanted her back, Sarah knew, not for her labor but for his pride. She had escaped him once, made him look weak. He needed to reclaim her to restore his sense of control. "Agreed," he finally said. "I will have the terms drawn up by a lawyer." You have my word before these witnesses." "Your word means nothing," Caleb said harshly. "Sarah, do not do this. We can fight him in court, prove that contract was fraud." "With what money? What lawyer?" Sarah touched his arm gently. "This is the only way to keep you safe. I will not have your ruin on my conscience. And I will not have yours on mine. Sarah, please, there has to be another way." Before anyone could respond, the door burst open and a woman rushed in, dusty from hard travel. She was Chinese, middle-aged, with fierce eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "Wait, do not let him take her," the woman said in accented but clear English. "Who are you?" the sheriff demanded. "My name is Clara Chen. I worked for Jacob Thornton in Kansas. I am the one who helped Sarah Sullivan escape." Clara pointed at Thornton. "That man is a monster. He beat and starved and violated the women who worked for him. Sarah was not the first he branded, only the one who got away." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Sarah stared at Clara in disbelief. "How are you here? Your friend Mrs. Dawson is my aunt. When I heard Jacob Thornton was in California, I came as fast as I could. I brought evidence." Clara pulled a bundle of letters from her bag. Correspondence from 3 other women who worked for Thornton and escaped. They described the same pattern of abuse, and I have this. She lifted her sleeve to reveal burned scars on her forearm. "He burned me with a poker when I questioned his treatment of Sarah. I have scars on my back from his whip as well. That contract, he claims, is legitimate. He forces women to sign it when they are desperate, then uses it to trap them. It is slavery in everything but name." Thornton's face had gone purple with rage. "This woman is a liar and a thief. She has no credibility." 3 women with matching stories and physical scars have credibility," the sheriff said, his tone changing as he examined the letters Clara provided. "And if what is described here is true, we are talking about serious crimes, Mr. Thornton. Assault, false imprisonment, maybe worse. Allegations, nothing more. I am a respected businessman with a pattern of abusing vulnerable women," Caleb finished. "Sheriff, I think we need a more thorough investigation before anyone is forced to go anywhere." The sheriff nodded slowly. "I agree. Miss Sullivan, you are free to remain where you are for now. Mr. Thornton, I suggest you stay in town while we look into these matters further, and I will be sending word to the authorities in Kansas about the claims made today." Thornton's eyes burned with fury as he looked at Sarah. "This is not over. That brand marks you as mine, and everyone who sees it will know. You are ruined, Sarah Sullivan. No respectable man will ever want you now." "Good thing I do not care much about respectability," Caleb said, stepping between them. "And you are wrong about that brand. All it proves is that you are capable of monstrous cruelty. Sarah bears that mark with more dignity than you will ever possess." The sheriff ushered everyone out, promising to continue the investigation. Sarah found herself back in Caleb's wagon, Clara and Mrs. Dawson accompanying them, still reeling from the sudden reversal of fortune. "I cannot believe you came," Sarah said to Clara, tears streaming down her face. "You risked everything to help me." "You helped me first just by being kind when I had nothing," Clara replied. "Besides, I was tired of running. Tired of letting that man win. If we all stay silent, he keeps hurting people." Back at the Copper Ridge Ranch, the women gathered in the parlor while Caleb made coffee. Sarah felt exhausted but lighter, as though a weight she had carried for years had finally lifted slightly. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait for the investigation," Caleb said. "But in the meantime, you are safe here. Clara too, if she wants to stay." "I would like that," Clara said. "My aunt tells me you need a housekeeper, Mr. Lancaster. I am very qualified. You are hired." Caleb smiled, then turned serious as he looked at Sarah. "We still need to resolve your marriage to Theodore. He cast you out, but legally you are still bound to him." "I will speak to him," Sarah said. "Perhaps he will agree to an annulment based on the deception about my past, or a divorce. Either way, I want that tie severed." Theodore proved willing to cooperate, eager to distance himself from the scandal. He agreed to an annulment on grounds of fraud, claiming Sarah had deceived him about her past. It was not entirely fair, but Sarah did not care. Within 3 weeks, the legal paperwork was filed and approved. She was no longer Sarah Morrison, but Sarah Sullivan once more, unmarried and free. The investigation into Jacob Thornton moved slowly but thoroughly. More women came forward with stories of abuse. The evidence became overwhelming, and eventually, Thornton was arrested and sent back to Kansas to face charges. Sarah had to testify, reliving her trauma in painful detail. But Clara stood beside her throughout, a living testament that survival was possible. The trial took months. Sarah remained at the Copper Ridge Ranch, helping Clara with housekeeping and gradually learning what it meant to live without fear. Caleb was endlessly patient, never pushing for more than friendship, though Sarah saw the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching. One evening in early spring, nearly a year after she had first arrived in Sierra City, Sarah found Caleb on the porch watching the sunset. She sat beside him, comfortable in the silence they had developed. "Jacob Thornton was convicted today," she said softly. "Clara received word from Kansas. 10 years in prison for assault and false imprisonment. Good. It is less than he deserves, but at least he cannot hurt anyone else for a while. It is over. After all this time, it is actually over." Sarah felt tears pricking her eyes. "I am free, Caleb, truly free. No contract, no husband, no brand owner coming to reclaim me. How does it feel? Terrifying, liberating, strange." Sarah laughed shakily. "I do not know how to be free. I have spent my whole life belonging to someone or something. You learn by trying. By making choices and discovering what you want." Caleb turned to face her. "What do you want, Sarah?" It was the question she had been avoiding for months, afraid of the answer. But sitting here with this good man who had stood by her through everything, who had fought for her freedom without demanding anything in return, Sarah finally knew. "I want to stay here. I want to keep working with Clara, building something of our own. I want to wake up without fear every morning. And I want—" She paused, gathering courage. "I want to know if the way you looked at me a year ago was real, if you still care, now that I am free to care back." Caleb's breath caught. "Sarah, I have cared about you since the day I picked you up from that stagecoach. Watching you survive everything you have been through, seeing your strength and grace and determination, I fell in love with you somewhere along the way. But I never said anything because I did not want to trap you again, did not want you to feel obligated or owned. You could never make me feel owned. You are the only person who has ever truly seen me as fully human." Sarah reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I am falling in love with you too, Caleb. It scares me because I do not trust my judgment about men, but I trust you. You have proven over and over that you see me as a partner, not property." "You are no one's property," Caleb said fiercely, echoing the words he had spoken a year earlier. "Not mine, not anyone's. But if you wanted to be my partner, my equal in all things, building a life together by choice rather than obligation, that would be my greatest joy. I want that. I want you. But slowly, please. I need time to learn how to be in a relationship that is not about ownership or control. We have all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and kissed her with such tenderness that Sarah felt something broken inside her begin to heal. This was what love should feel like: chosen, mutual, safe. This was partnership. They courted properly over the following months. with Clara and Mrs. Dawson serving as cheerful chaperones. Caleb took Sarah on picnics in the hills, taught her to ride horses with confidence rather than fear, and listened to her talk about her dreams of maybe starting a business helping other women who had escaped bad situations. He shared his own dreams of expanding the ranch, maybe running for local office someday to change laws that failed to protect vulnerable people. They married in the autumn, exactly 18 months after Sarah had first arrived in Sierra City. This ceremony was nothing like the cold transaction with Theodore. The church was packed with friends, more friends than Sarah had ever imagined having. Clara stood as her witness, wearing a beautiful dress they had sewn together. The Reverend spoke about love as a choice and partnership as a blessing. When Caleb said his vows, looking into Sarah's eyes with absolute devotion, she felt the last chains of her past fall away. I, Caleb Lancaster, take you, Sarah Sullivan, to be my partner in all things. I promise to honor your freedom, respect your choices, and stand beside you as an equal for all our days. You are not and will never be my property. You are my beloved, my best friend, my greatest adventure. Sarah's voice was strong and clear as she responded. I, Sarah Sullivan, take you, Caleb Lancaster, to be my partner in all things. I promise to trust you with my heart, share my dreams with you, and build a life based on mutual respect and chosen love. You have shown me what it means to be truly free, and I choose to share that freedom with you. When they kissed as husband and wife, the congregation erupted in applause. Sarah felt joy bubbling up inside her, pure and uncomplicated. This was what she had been searching for without knowing, a love that set her free rather than binding her. The celebration afterward was raucous and joyful. Even Theodore Morrison attended, having gradually come to regret how he had treated Sarah and hoping to make amends by supporting her new marriage. Sarah appreciated the gesture, though she had no desire to resume any kind of friendship with him. The real gift came from Clara, who pulled Sarah aside during the festivities. I have been saving my wages, Clara said, and my aunt has agreed to invest as well. We want to start a boarding house in Sierra City, a place specifically for women who need refuge from bad situations. Women like we were. We could provide temporary shelter, help them find employment, teach them skills. What do you think? I think it is a brilliant idea, Sarah said, embracing her friend. Count me in. Caleb and I discussed this, and he is supportive. Between the three of us, we can make this happen. And they did. The Copper Ridge Women's Refuge opened the following spring, initially just a few rooms in a house Clara's aunt owned, but eventually expanding to a full boarding house with capacity for 20 women. Sarah managed the day-to-day operations while Clara handled the practical care, and Mrs. Dawson provided cooking and maternal wisdom. Caleb used his growing political connections to help secure funding and legal protections for their residents. Over the years, they helped dozens of women escape abusive situations, find employment, and start new lives. Some moved on to other towns or states. Others, like Emma Dawson, stayed in Sierra City and became part of the community. The refuge became known throughout California as a place where women could find not just shelter but genuine support and a chance to rebuild. Sarah's brand remained on her shoulder, a permanent mark she could never erase, but its meaning had changed. Where once it had been a symbol of shame and ownership, it became a reminder of what she had survived and overcome. She never hid it anymore. When new women arrived at the refuge bearing their own scars, physical or emotional, Sarah would sometimes show them her mark and tell her story. This brand was meant to mark me as property, she would say. But it failed. I am not defined by what was done to me. I am defined by what I chose to become after. You are not your scars. You are not your past. You are strong and valuable and deserving of dignity, regardless of what anyone else has said or done. Those words, so similar to what Caleb had told her that first night at his ranch, gave hope to countless women who thought themselves too damaged to deserve better. Sarah and Caleb's marriage flourished. They welcomed their first child, a son they named Samuel, 2 years after their wedding. He had Caleb's gray eyes and Sarah's determination, and he grew up watching his parents work as true partners in all things. 3 years later, a daughter named Rose joined the family, sweet-natured and curious. The children grew up knowing the story of their mother's past, told in age-appropriate ways that emphasized resilience and justice rather than just suffering. They learned that scars did not diminish worth, that survival was a form of courage, and that love meant choosing someone's freedom over control. As the years passed, Sarah sometimes thought about that terrified woman who had stepped off the stagecoach into Sierra City, with a secret burned into her skin and fear consuming her heart. She wished she could go back and tell that woman what she knew now, that the darkest moments do not define the whole story, that healing is possible, and that real love exists, love that sees your wounds and does not flinch, that says, you are no one's property and means it with every fiber of its being. The Copper Ridge Ranch prospered under Sarah and Caleb's joint management. They made decisions together, disagreed sometimes but always with respect, and built something neither could have achieved alone. The Women's Refuge continued to grow, eventually inspiring similar organizations in other California towns. On their 10th anniversary, Caleb surprised Sarah with a gift. It was a brand, carefully crafted by the local blacksmith, but instead of initials it bore a symbol, a bird in flight, wings spread wide. I do not understand, Sarah said, examining the beautiful metalwork. I thought you might want to reclaim the concept, Caleb explained. Not to mark yourself again, but to use on our ranch, a symbol of freedom rather than ownership. But only if you want to. If the whole idea is too painful, I will melt it down right now. Sarah held the brand, feeling its weight. The bird design was exquisite, full of motion and life. She thought about all the women who had passed through the refuge, all the stories of transformation and second chances. She thought about her own journey from terror to triumph. I love it, she said finally. Let us use it on our ranch gate and on the refuge door. A symbol that says everyone here is free to fly. They installed the brand symbol that week, and it became synonymous with safety and freedom throughout the region. Women traveling to California seeking refuge would ask directions to the place with the flying bird, knowing they would find help there. Sarah's relationship with her body and her scars continued to evolve. Some days, she barely thought about the brand on her shoulder. Other days, it ached with phantom pain, reminding her of trauma that would never fully disappear. But Caleb's love remained constant, a steady presence that helped her navigate the complicated healing process. You are so beautiful, he would tell her, tracing the scar tissue with gentle fingers. Every part of you, including the marks that show what you have survived. Even this. Even proof that I was once treated as less than human, especially that. Because it is proof that you refuse to accept that treatment as your identity. You transcended it, Sarah. You turned suffering into service, helping others escape what you endured. That mark is part of your story, and your story is extraordinary. Their children grew into adolescence, and then adulthood, both choosing to remain in Sierra City and contribute to the community their parents had helped build. Samuel became a lawyer, using his skills to advocate for women's rights and challenge unjust laws. Rose became a teacher, educating a new generation about equality and justice. The refuge continued operating for decades, eventually transitioning into a permanent institution supported by state funding. Clara remained involved until her death at age 73, having personally helped more than 200 women find freedom and safety. Her legacy lived on in the countless lives she had touched. Sarah and Caleb grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced hardships, droughts that threatened the ranch, financial setbacks, health scares, but they faced them as partners, never alone. The promise Caleb had made on their wedding day to honor Sarah's freedom and treat her as an equal was kept every single day of their marriage. On Sarah's 65th birthday, surrounded by children and grandchildren, she stood on the porch of the Copper Ridge Ranch and looked out over the land she and Caleb had built together. The sun was setting over the golden hills, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. The refuge in town had just celebrated its 40th anniversary, and 3 new women had arrived that week seeking shelter. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked, joining her with 2 glasses of lemonade. "I am thinking about that terrified woman who arrived here 40 years ago, believing herself to be ruined and worthless. I am thinking about how wrong she was, and how grateful I am that you showed her otherwise. You showed yourself, Sarah. I just reminded you of what was already true. You did more than that. You loved me when I could not love myself. You fought for me when I had given up fighting. You saw me as fully human when everyone else saw only a branded piece of property." Caleb set down the glasses and took Sarah's hands, his touch as gentle and reverent as it had been 40 years earlier. "You are the most remarkable person I have ever known. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life, even with all the complications. The scandal, the trauma, the years of healing, especially because of those things. They made us who we are, Sarah. They taught us what matters and what does not, and they led us here to this life we built together." Sarah leaned into her husband's embrace, feeling profoundly grateful for the journey that had brought them to this moment. The brand on her shoulder was still there, still visible when she looked in the mirror. But it had lost its power to define her. She was not branded property. She was not damaged goods. She was not the sum of what had been done to her. She was Sarah Lancaster, partner to a man who loved her as an equal, mother and grandmother to a family who respected her, co-founder of an organization that had saved countless lives. She was a survivor who had transformed her suffering into service, her pain into purpose. The scar remained, but its meaning had been rewritten entirely. It was no longer a symbol of ownership but a testament to resilience, not a mark of shame but a badge of honor. Not an ending but a beginning, the beginning of a life chosen and built on freedom, dignity, and love. As the sun completed its descent and stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Sarah thought about all the women who had passed through the refuge over the decades, all the stories of transformation and new beginnings. She thought about Clara's courage in coming forward to testify against Jacob Thornton. She thought about the legal reforms Samuel had helped achieve, making it harder for men to trap women in abusive employment or marriages. She thought about the students Rose had educated, spreading understanding and empathy into the next generation. One mark, intended to claim ownership, had instead sparked a movement toward freedom. One woman's refusal to be defined by her worst moment had created ripples that spread far beyond what she could have imagined. "Tell me about the new arrivals at the refuge," Sarah said to Caleb as they settled into their porch chairs, hands still linked. "I want to know their stories." And he did, describing 3 women who had found their way to Sierra City, seeking the same hope Sarah had once desperately needed. They talked late into the evening, planning how best to help, discussing opportunities for employment and education. Partners in all things, Just as they had promised so many years ago, the brand on Sarah's shoulder had been meant to mark her as property, to claim ownership over her body and future. But in the end, it had done the opposite. It had marked the beginning of her journey to true freedom, to love that liberated rather than constrained, to a life built on choice rather than coercion. She was no one's property. She never had been, despite what others had tried to claim. She belonged to herself, and she had chosen to share that self freely with people who honored and respected her humanity. That was the real story behind the scar. Not ownership, but liberation. Not an ending, but a beginning that had led to more joy and purpose than she had ever imagined possible. As Sarah and Caleb sat together under the stars, their hands intertwined after 40 years of partnership, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found what she had been searching for when she stepped off that stage coach so long ago. Not just safety or security, though those mattered. Not just respect or kindness, though those were precious. She had found love in its truest form, the kind that says, "You are no one's property," and means it. The kind that sees your scars and calls you beautiful. The kind that fights for your freedom even at cost to itself. The kind that weathers every storm as partners rather than as owner and owned. That was worth more than any brand could ever diminish. That was a happy ending earned through courage, sustained by love, and built to last a lifetime. And it did.